Imagine a world where no one goes hungry, where wealth is shared, and where every person contributes to society according to their ability and receives according to their needs. This is the vision of communism, a radical and enduring philosophy that has inspired revolutions, sparked debates, and challenged the way humans think about justice, freedom, and equality. At its core, communism is not merely an economic system. It is a moral, social, and philosophical response to the persistent inequalities and injustices that arise in human society. Communism begins with a fundamental critique, the idea that private ownership of the means of production, factories, land, and resources creates systemic exploitation. Those who own capital accumulate wealth not by merit alone, but by extracting the labor of those who produce goods and services. In Marxist terms, workers are alienated from the products they create, from the act of labor itself, and from each other. This alienation extends beyond the workplace into the very structure of society, shaping relationships, values, and human potential. The philosophy of communism, therefore, is inseparable from questions of human nature. How should humans relate to each other? What role should fairness and cooperation play in society? And is it possible to create a world where human dignity is not dependent on wealth or social status? Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, the architects of this philosophy, grounded their ideas in what they called historical materialism, the notion that history progresses through the struggle of classes. Every era, from feudalism to capitalism, is defined by the tension between those who control resources and those who labor. Marx and Engels argued that capitalism, while efficient in generating wealth, inevitably leads to inequality, cyclical crises, and the concentration of power. Communism is presented as the next stage of societal evolution, a classless society in which exploitation is abolished, social hierarchies are dismantled, and human creativity and cooperation can flourish unimpeded. Yet communism is not merely a vision of equality, it is a vision of human fulfillment. By eliminating the separation between worker and product, it promises to restore meaning to labor. People no longer work merely to survive, they work as participants in a cooperative society, shaping their environment and contributing to collective well-being. Philosophically, this raises profound questions about freedom and morality. Is true freedom the ability to accumulate wealth, or the ability to live without oppression and inequality? Can justice exist in a society where a few control the majority of resources, even if everyone is technically free to pursue their desires? The tension between collective good and individual freedom is central to communist thought. Philosophers and ethicists have long debated whether communism is compatible with human nature. Critics argue that humans are inherently competitive and self-interested, suggesting that enforced equality suppresses personal freedom and ambition. Proponents counter that social structures, rather than innate traits, shape behavior, and that a society based on cooperation and mutual aid could nurture our better instincts. The ethical foundation of communism is simple yet radical. Resources and opportunities should be distributed not according to wealth or birth, but according to need, with the ultimate goal of reducing suffering and promoting human flourishing. Throughout the 20th century, these philosophical principles were tested on a massive scale. From the Soviet Union to Maoist China, Cuba, and beyond, nations attempted to implement communism through revolutions, central planning, and state control. These experiments produced mixed results. On one hand, they achieved remarkable social gains, literacy rates soared, healthcare became universally accessible, and extreme poverty declined in certain regions. On the other hand, authoritarianism, economic inefficiency, and political repression often accompany these efforts, demonstrating the difficulty of translating idealized philosophy into reality. Critics see these outcomes as evidence that communism is utopian, incompatible with the complexity of human societies. Supporters argue that these were distortions corrupted by historical circumstances and the concentration of power, rather than failures of the philosophy itself. Communism's philosophical relevance extends far beyond the 20th century. In today's globalized world, rising inequality, environmental crises, and corporate dominance have revived interest in ideas of shared wealth and collective responsibility. Concepts such as democratic socialism, worker cooperatives, and universal basic income reflect attempts to apply communist principles in modern contexts without replicating the authoritarian pitfalls of past experiments. Moreover, communism challenges us to reconsider the very notion of success. Should societies measure prosperity by the wealth of a few or by the well-being of all citizens? The philosophy of communism also engages with deeper ethical and existential questions. It asks us to consider our responsibilities to one another and to future generations. In advocating for the abolition of private property and the creation of shared resources, communism forces us to reflect on the morality of inequality itself. Is it acceptable that a minority enjoy excessive luxury while millions struggle to meet basic needs? Does true justice require structural change, or can it be achieved through charity and incremental reform? These questions are not merely political, they touch on the fundamental values that define humanity. Furthermore, communism confronts us with the paradox of utopia. By envisioning a society without class, without exploitation, and without poverty, it compels us to imagine what human life could be if social, economic, and moral barriers were removed. Yet the pursuit of this utopia often collides with human imperfection, scarcity, and political realities. The tension between idealism and pragmatism is perhaps the central philosophical challenge of communism. How can societies pursue equality and justice without sacrificing freedom, creativity, or agency? Despite its contentious history, the philosophy of communism remains a powerful lens for understanding society. It invites us to interrogate our assumptions about wealth, labor, and justice. It reminds us that economic systems are not neutral, they shape human behavior, define social norms, and influence the moral landscape. Most importantly, it challenges us to imagine alternative ways of organizing society, where cooperation and shared prosperity are not idealistic dreams but attainable goals. In conclusion, communism is more than a political ideology. It is a philosophical framework that compels us to confront the realities of inequality, the meaning of justice, and the possibilities of human cooperation. Whether viewed as utopia, cautionary tale, or moral philosophy, it continues to provoke reflection and debate. It asks us not only to critique the present, but to envision a different kind of world, a world where fairness, dignity, and shared opportunity are not privileges for the few, but rights for all. In a society still grappling with the consequences of wealth concentration, environmental degradation, and social injustice, the philosophy of communism remains profoundly relevant. It is, at its essence, a challenge to humanity, to consider how we might live together in equity, to confront the structural roots of oppression, and to dream of a world where cooperation and justice shape the foundation of our shared existence.